The morning sun rose lazily over the quiet streets of Crestwood, casting long shadows across the neatly manicured lawns and white picket fences. It was a neighborhood like any other, comfortable, predictable, and utterly unremarkable. The kind of place where nothing truly bad ever seemed to happen, where the biggest concerns were late mortgage payments or whether the lawn was mowed on time. But the veneer of normalcy was beginning to crack, though no one realized it yet. Something was terribly wrong in Crestwood, but the truth was so unsettling that it hid itself in plain sight. It began slowly, almost imperceptibly. One day, a child named Ben didn't show up to play with his friends. It wasn't unusual for children to be absent. Perhaps he had caught the flu, or maybe his family had gone on an impromptu trip. The neighbors, accustomed to the rhythms of suburban life, thought little of it. After all, children often came and went, their lives dictated by the whims of their parents or the school calendar. But Ben didn't return the next day or the day after that. His friends shrugged it off at first, their young minds too distracted by new games and adventures to dwell on a missing playmate. His parents, Tom and Lisa, were tight-lipped when asked about his absence, their faces drawn with worry. They insisted that Ben was fine, that he was staying with relatives for a while. And so the matter was dropped, filed away in the minds of the neighbors as one of those small mysteries that life occasionally throws your way. A few weeks later, another child, little Sophie, was nowhere to be found. Her mother, Jane, noticed her absence one afternoon, thinking at first that Sophie had gone to play at a friend's house. But as the sun began to set and the sky turned the color of bruised peaches, Jane's worry grew. She called around, but no one had seen Sophie. Panic set in, and soon the entire neighborhood was out searching, calling her name, peering into bushes, and checking backyards. But Sophie had vanished without a trace. The police were summoned, their flashing lights a jarring sight in the peaceful streets of Crestwood. Officers combed through Sophie's home, interviewed neighbors, and organized search parties that swept through the nearby woods. But there was nothing. No signs of a struggle, no witnesses, no clues. The only thing out of place was a small toy, a wooden doll with faded paint, lying in the middle of Sophie's bedroom floor. It was old, out of place among her other toys, and no one could recall where it had come from. The disappearances continued, each one more baffling than the last. A boy named Lucas, who was last seen riding his bike down the street. Emma, who vanished from her backyard while her parents were just inside the house. And Rachel, who was playing in the park one moment and gone the next. Each time, the story was the same. No signs of forced entry, no witnesses, just a child who seemed to have been plucked from their life without a sound. With each new disappearance, the tension in Crestwood grew. The community, once so close-knit and friendly, began to unravel. Parents kept their children indoors, bolting doors and windows that had never before needed such protection. The streets, once filled with the laughter of children, fell silent. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken fears, the residents' faces etched with the kind of anxiety that only comes when something you love is threatened. Yet, despite the growing unease, the connection between the disappearances remained elusive. The police were baffled, their investigations turning up nothing but dead ends. Each case seemed to evaporate into thin air, leaving behind only grief and unanswered questions. The toys, always left behind in the children's bedrooms or near where they were last seen, were dismissed as irrelevant, mere coincidences in the eyes of the authorities. But one mother, Sarah Mitchell, couldn't shake the feeling that something more sinister was at play. As she watched the community around her descend into fear and suspicion, she began to notice the one thing that everyone else had overlooked. Each missing child had received a strange, inexplicable toy just days before they disappeared. A toy that had appeared without warning, its origin unknown. A toy that now sat eerily out of place in her own home. It was a small wind-up robot painted in chipped, faded colors, with eyes that seemed to follow her every move. She had found it one morning on the doorstep, assumed it was a gift from a neighbor, and handed it to her son, Ethan, without a second thought. But now, with Ethan still safely at home but the other children gone, the toy took on a more ominous significance. As Sarah turned the toy over in her hands, dread settled in the pit of her stomach. She couldn't explain it, but she knew that this toy and the others like it were connected to the disappearances. She knew that whatever was happening in Crestwood was not random, but a part of something larger, something terrifying that had yet to reveal itself. And she knew that if she didn't act soon, Ethan might be next. Sarah's resolve hardened. She would find out where these toys were coming from, who or what was behind them. She would protect her son, no matter the cost, and she would uncover the dark secret that had taken root in her neighborhood, the secret that had turned Crestwood from a place of safety into a hunting ground. But she had no idea how deep the mystery ran, or how close she already was to the danger that threatened to consume them all. The once vibrant community of Crestwood had fallen into a heavy silence. Where children's laughter used to echo through the streets, there was now only the hum of anxious whispers and the rustle of leaves as the wind blew through the deserted playgrounds. Houses that had once felt like safe havens were now fortresses, with parents standing guard over their children, eyes filled with the weight of dread. Yet, despite the growing fear, the disappearances continued, each one a sharp reminder that whatever was happening was far from over. For Sarah Mitchell, the tension had become unbearable. Every time she looked at her son, Ethan, she couldn't shake the feeling that he could be next. The thought haunted her, keeping her awake at night, her mind running through every possible scenario, every potential threat. But there was one thought, one disturbing idea that she couldn't ignore: the toys. Those strange, seemingly harmless toys that had appeared out of nowhere, left behind like breadcrumbs in a trail leading to the unknown. The day after Sophie's disappearance, Sarah found herself standing in front of Ethan's bedroom, the small wind-up robot she had given him clutched in her hand. She had barely noticed it before, just another toy in a sea of action figures, cars, and building blocks. But now it was all she could think about. The more she stared at the toy, the more it unsettled her. It wasn't just the faded paint or the chipped edges that bothered her. It was the fact that she had no idea where it had come from. She tried to remember the day it had arrived, how she had found it on the doorstep. She had assumed it was a gift, maybe from a neighbor, but when she asked around, no one claimed to have left it. At the time, it seemed like a harmless mystery, a simple act of kindness that had no explanation. But now, with the disappearances casting a long shadow over Crestwood, that mystery felt far more sinister. Driven by a gnawing sense of unease, Sarah began to piece together the pattern that everyone else had missed. She started by visiting the homes of the other missing children, finding excuses to speak with the parents, subtly asking about their kids' toys. It was a delicate balance. She didn't want to alarm anyone more than they already were, but she needed to know if her suspicions were correct. To her growing horror, every parent she spoke to mentioned a new toy that had appeared shortly before their child disappeared. Ben had received a wooden train that played a haunting tune when wound up. Sophie had been given a porcelain doll with glassy eyes that seemed too lifelike, and Lucas had found a tin soldier with a bayonet fixed to its tiny rifle. Each toy was different, yet they all shared the same unsettling quality, a sense that they didn't belong in this time, in this place, or even in this world. As she gathered these details, Sarah couldn't ignore the chill that crept down her spine. There was no way these toys were simply coincidences, no way they were just random gifts. Someone or something was leaving them, and that someone knew far too much about the children of Crestwood. But who could it be? And why? The questions gnawed at her, refusing to let her rest. In the days that followed, Sarah became increasingly obsessed with the toys. She combed through old newspapers, searching for any mention of similar cases, any reports of strange toys or unexplained disappearances. She found a few stories, some going back decades, of children who had vanished under mysterious circumstances, but the details were always vague, the connections tenuous. There was talk of an old legend, a tale told to children to keep them from wandering too far, an urban myth about the Pied Piper. The story was familiar, a bedtime fable that most parents in Crestwood had heard at some point. The Piper, it was said, was a figure who would come to town and play his enchanted flute, leading all the children away to a place from which they never returned. But that was just a story, wasn't it? A way to scare children into obedience, a relic of a time when people believed in things that go bump in the night. Yet the more Sarah thought about it, the less certain she became. What if there was some truth to the legend? What if the Piper was more than just a story, more than just a myth? What if he was real, and what if he was here in Crestwood? It seemed impossible, ridiculous even. But then again, so did the idea that children could vanish without a trace. As her obsession grew, Sarah became more isolated. She stopped attending the neighborhood meetings, where the other parents gathered to discuss safety measures and the latest updates from the police. She knew they wouldn't understand, that they would dismiss her theories as the ravings of a woman driven mad by fear. But she couldn't stop. She had to know the truth, even if it meant walking down a path that no one else dared to tread. One night, after Ethan had gone to bed, Sarah sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by newspaper clippings, old books, and the toys she had gathered from the other parents. The wind-up robot stared at her from across the table, its painted eyes glinting in the dim light. She picked it up, turning it over in her hands, searching for any clue that might tell her where it had come from. That's when she noticed it, a small, almost invisible marking on the base of the robot, a symbol that she didn't recognize. It was faint, barely etched into the metal, but it was there. She grabbed a magnifying glass and studied the symbol, her heart pounding in her chest. It was a simple design, almost like a rune or a sigil, something ancient and forgotten. She didn't know what it meant, but she knew it was important. It was the first real clue she had found, the first tangible piece of evidence that connected the toys to something far older and darker than she had imagined. She felt a thrill of fear and excitement, knowing that she was closer to the truth than ever before. But as she stared at the symbol, a deep sense of unease settled over her. This was no ordinary mystery, no simple puzzle to be solved. Whatever was happening in Crestwood, whatever was taking the children, was tied to something ancient and malevolent. And now, by uncovering this clue, she had placed herself and Ethan in unimaginable danger. Sarah knew she couldn't stop now, not when she was so close to understanding the truth. But she also knew that the answers she sought would come at a price that she might not be willing to pay. The darkness that had taken hold of Crestwood was watching her, waiting for her next move, and it wouldn't let her go easily. As the clock struck midnight, Sarah put the robot down and looked out the window into the darkness beyond. Somewhere out there, hidden in the shadows, was the key to it all, and she would find it, no matter what it took. Because now it wasn't just about the missing children. It was about her son, and she would do anything to keep him safe, even if it meant facing the Piper himself. The tension in Crestwood had reached a fever pitch. The once peaceful neighborhood now felt like a pressure cooker, ready to explode at any moment. Parents kept a tight grip on their children's hands, their eyes darting nervously around, searching for threats that were invisible, yet undeniably present. The disappearances had cast a long shadow over the community, and no one knew where it might strike next. But Sarah Mitchell was no longer content to wait and see. She was determined to find the truth, even if it meant walking into the heart of the danger that had claimed so many lives. Sarah's investigation had taken her down a dark and winding path, deeper than she ever could have imagined. The toys, once thought to be harmless trinkets, had revealed themselves to be something far more sinister, catalysts or perhaps even bait left by an unknown hand. And now she had a clue that could lead her to the source, the strange symbol etched into the base of the wind-up robot. Determined to understand its meaning, Sarah turned to the only place she thought might hold the answers, the library. It was a relic from another time, filled with dusty books and forgotten secrets. Crestwood's library had seen few visitors in recent years, its shelves more often browsed by curious children than by serious researchers. But Sarah was no stranger to research. She had always been methodical, persistent, and now those qualities would serve her well. She spent days hunched over ancient texts, cross-referencing symbols and sigils, poring over folklore and myths. The symbol was elusive, but eventually she found it. A small, barely legible entry in a book on old-world magic and forgotten deities. The symbol was an ancient one, associated with a figure known as the Piper in local lore, but which in older records went by many names. The Collector, the Enchanter, the Shadowed One. The entity was said to be a creature of immense power, able to charm children away from their homes with nothing more than a tune or a toy. But it was more than just a spirit or a demon. It was a force of nature, a manifestation of loss and longing that had existed for centuries, feeding on the innocent. The legends told of a pied piper who appeared in villages, leading the children away with promises of play and laughter, only to trap them in a world beyond reach, a world where they would remain forever young, forever lost. In some stories, the piper was a victim, a child taken long ago who had been transformed into a timeless collector, cursed to bring more children into the fold. In others, he was a malicious entity, delighting in the sorrow of the parents left behind. But one thing was certain: the Piper was real, and he had found his way to Crestwood. Sarah's heart pounded as she read the final passages. The Piper's power was tied to the toys he left behind. Each one was a beacon, a gateway that connected the child to him, binding them to his will. Once a child accepted the toy, the Piper could reach out to them, pulling them into his world when the time was right. It explained everything: the disappearances, the lack of struggle, the eerie quiet that surrounded each case. The toys were the key to his power, and the symbol was his mark, a signature that linked him to his victims. But how could she fight something like that? Sarah felt a wave of despair wash over her. This was no ordinary threat. This was something ancient, something beyond human understanding. She was just a mother, not a warrior or a sorcerer. What could she possibly do to stop it? Desperation pushed her to continue. If the Piper's power came from the toys, then perhaps there was a way to sever that connection, to break the spell that held the children captive. She had to find where the toys were coming from, had to find the Piper's lair. The library offered no more clues, so she turned her attention to the woods on the outskirts of Crestwood, the one place she hadn't yet explored, the one place that everyone else seemed to avoid. The woods had always been a place of mystery and danger, filled with rumors of ghosts and strange sightings. Children were warned to stay away, and for the most part, they did. But Sarah remembered something her grandmother had once told her, a story about the cursed woods, where it was said that a figure dressed in black was seen wandering among the trees, always just out of sight, always watching. She knew she had to go there to confront whatever was hiding in those woods. She prepared herself as best she could, arming herself with a flashlight, a map of the area, and the wind-up robot that had started her down this path. It felt like a talisman, a connection to Ethan that she couldn't afford to lose. As she left her house, the night had already settled in, the sky a deep, foreboding black, and the air thick with the promise of rain. The woods loomed ahead, dark and silent, the trees like sentinels guarding the secrets within. Sarah hesitated for a moment at the edge, the weight of what she was about to do pressing down on her. But then she thought of Ethan, of the children who had vanished, and she steeled herself. There was no turning back now. The path through the woods was narrow and overgrown, the underbrush scratching at her legs as she pushed forward. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant hoot of an owl. Sarah's flashlight cut through the darkness, but the light seemed weak, swallowed up by the shadows that pressed in around her. The deeper she went, the more she felt like she was being watched, like something just beyond the edge of the light was waiting for her to make a wrong move. It wasn't long before she began to see signs that she was on the right track. Old, discarded toys scattered among the roots of the trees, half buried in the dirt. A doll's head here, a broken truck there, all of them eerily similar to the toys that had appeared in Crestwood. Each one sent a chill down her spine, but they also spurred her on, proof that she was getting closer. Finally, after what felt like hours, she stumbled upon a clearing. In the center stood a small, decrepit cabin, its windows dark and empty. The roof sagged and the walls were covered in moss and vines, as if nature itself was trying to swallow it whole. But despite its appearance, there was something undeniably sinister about the place, something that made Sarah's skin crawl. She approached cautiously, every nerve on edge. The door was ajar, creaking softly as it swayed in the breeze. Inside, the darkness was absolute, but as she stepped through the threshold, her flashlight revealed a scene that made her heart skip a beat. The cabin was filled with toys, hundreds of them, maybe more, stacked on shelves, piled in corners, covering every surface. Dolls with cracked porcelain faces, stuffed animals with matted fur, wind-up cars with rusted gears. Each one was unique, but they all shared the same disturbing quality. Their eyes seemed to follow her as she moved, as if they were alive, watching her every step. In the center of the room, surrounded by the toys, stood a figure. At first, Sarah thought it was a mannequin, or perhaps another toy. But then it moved, turning to face her. It was a child, a boy no older than 10, with pale skin and hollow eyes that seemed to pierce right through her. "I've been waiting for you," the boy said, his voice soft and eerie, like the whisper of wind through the trees. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She had found him, the collector, the one who had been taking the children. But he wasn't what she had expected. He wasn't a monster or a shadowy figure. He was just a child, lost and alone. "Who are you?" Sarah managed to ask, her voice trembling. The boy tilted his head as if considering the question. "I was like them once," he said, gesturing to the toys around him. "I was taken too a long time ago. But now I bring them to him. He needs them, and I can't stop." Sarah took a step forward, her heart pounding. "The Piper? You mean the Piper?" The boy nodded. "He's everywhere. In the wind, in the trees, in the music. I can hear him, always. He tells me to find them, to bring them here. It's all I can do." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes. This was the boy who had once been just like Ethan, just like all the other children who had disappeared. Now he was trapped, cursed to serve the Piper for eternity. "But you don't have to," Sarah said, her voice stronger now. "We can stop this. You don't have to take any more children." The boy's expression was unreadable, but there was a flicker of something. Hope, perhaps, in his eyes. "It's too late," he whispered. "He's coming for you. He's coming for all of us." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She could feel it now, too, the presence that had been watching her, following her. The Piper was close, closer than she had realized. He had come this far, but now the real battle was about to begin. Gripping the wind-up robot in her hand, Sarah knew that whatever happened next, she couldn't let fear control her. The children's lives depended on her, and she would fight to save them, even if it meant facing the Piper himself. As the wind picked up outside, howling through the trees, Sarah steeled herself for what was to come. The mystery was unraveling, but the danger was far from over. The final confrontation was at hand, and she was ready to face it, no matter the cost. The air in the woods was thick with tension, the kind that presses against your skin, making it hard to breathe. The wind had picked up, swirling the leaves into frenzied patterns on the ground, and the trees seemed to bend and twist in unnatural ways, as if they too were afraid of what was coming. Sarah stood in the center of the clearing, her heart pounding, the small wind-up robot clutched tightly in her hand. The old cabin loomed behind her, filled with the eerie silence of forgotten toys, while before her, the darkness of the woods seemed to pulse and tremble with a life of its own. She knew he was there. She could feel him lurking just beyond the edge of the clearing, waiting. The Piper, the one who had taken the children, who had turned Crestwood into a nightmare from which there was no waking. Sarah's mind raced, trying to piece together everything she had learned, every scrap of knowledge she had gathered. She knew the Piper was not just a man, not just a ghost from a story, but something far older, far more powerful, a force of nature that had been preying on children for centuries. The boy, the collector, stood beside her, his expression a mix of fear and resignation. "He's coming," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the rising wind. "He knows you're here." Sarah turned to him, her voice firm. "We can stop him," she said, "but I need your help. You know him better than anyone. You know how he works." The boy shook his head, his hollow eyes filled with sorrow. You can't stop him. No one can. He's too strong, too old. He's part of this place, part of the world. All we can do is try to survive. Sarah knelt down, taking the boy's cold hand in hers. We can break the cycle, she insisted. We can end this here and now. But I need you to believe that. I need you to fight with me. For a moment, the boy hesitated, and then, slowly, he nodded. There's only one way, he said, his voice trembling. You have to confront him. You have to destroy the flute. It's the source of his power. Without it, he's nothing. The flute, the one thing that had connected all the legends, all the stories, the instrument that had lured the children away, that had woven the spell that bound them to the piper's will. Sarah felt a glimmer of hope. If she could find the flute, if she could destroy it, maybe, just maybe, she could end this nightmare once and for all. But as she stood, a chilling sound filled the air, freezing her in place. It was a melody, haunting and beautiful, drifting through the trees like a whisper on the wind. The piper's song. It was soft at first, almost gentle, but it grew louder with each passing second, wrapping around her like a shroud, pulling at her, beckoning her to follow. The boy's grip tightened on her hand, his eyes wide with terror. Don't listen, he pleaded. Don't let it take you. But it was too late. The music seeped into her mind, filling her thoughts, drowning out everything else. She could see the children now, their faces pale and ghostly, their eyes glazed with a sorrow that cut deep into her soul. They were calling to her, begging her to join them, to give in to the piper's will. Sarah fought against it, clinging to the memory of Ethan, to the love she had for her son. She couldn't let go. She couldn't give in. But the music was relentless, growing stronger, more insistent, each note a hammer driving her closer to the edge. And then she saw him, the piper. He emerged from the shadows, tall and slender, his face hidden beneath a hood, his eyes glowing with an unnatural light. In his hands he held the flute, carved from bone, ancient and cracked, yet radiating a power that seemed to pulse with every beat of Sarah's heart. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The music said everything. It spoke of promises and dreams, of a world where pain and fear didn't exist, where the children could play forever, safe and happy. It was a lie, but it was a lie that Sarah could feel pulling at her, dragging her down. But then, in the depths of that music, she heard something else. Another sound, faint and distant, but unmistakable. It was Ethan's voice calling out to her, calling her back. It was a sound that cut through the piper's melody, that reminded her of why she was here, of what she had to do. With a cry of defiance, Sarah tore herself away from the music, her eyes blazing with fury. She charged at the piper, her hand reaching for the flute. The piper's eyes widened in surprise, but he didn't move, didn't try to stop her. It was as if he couldn't believe that she would dare to challenge him. But Sarah didn't hesitate. She grabbed the flute, wrenching it from the piper's grasp, and in one swift motion she brought it down on a nearby rock. The flute shattered with a deafening crack, splintering into 1,000 pieces. The effect was immediate. The music stopped, cut off as if by a knife, leaving only a stunned silence in its wake. The piper let out a scream, a sound so filled with rage and pain that it seemed to shake the very ground beneath them. His form began to flicker, to fade, as if the destruction of the flute had severed his connection to this world. The children, the ones who had been lost, began to appear around them, their forms ghostly and translucent. They stared at Sarah, their eyes wide with a mix of confusion and relief. Slowly, one by one, they began to fade, their spirits released from the Piper's grasp, finally free. But there was no relief for Sarah. As the last of the children disappeared, she realized with a cold, sinking dread that Ethan was not among them. Her heart pounded in her chest, her mind racing with the implications. Had she been too late? Had she lost him forever? The Piper's form continued to dissolve, but before he vanished completely, he turned to her, his eyes burning with a hatred that she could feel in her bones. "You think you've won," he hissed, his voice barely more than a whisper. "But I'll always be here in the shadows, waiting. The curse is broken, but the hunger remains. I'll find a way back. I always do." And with that, he was gone, leaving only the shattered remains of the flute and the echoes of his words hanging in the air. Sarah collapsed to her knees, the weight of what she had done crashing down on her. The Piper was defeated, but at what cost? She had saved the other children, but Ethan, her Ethan, was still missing, lost in a world that she couldn't reach. The boy, the collector, stood beside her, his expression unreadable. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I tried to help, but some things can't be undone." Sarah looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "But where is he? Where's Ethan?" The boy shook his head. "He's still out there somewhere, but without the Piper's power, he's beyond reach, lost between worlds. I don't know if you'll ever find him." Sarah's heart broke at those words, but she refused to give up. She had come this far, and she wouldn't stop now. Not until she had found her son, no matter how long it took, no matter where she had to go. As she stood, the first rays of dawn began to break through the trees, casting a soft golden light over the clearing. The night was over, but the battle was far from won. The Piper was gone, but his shadow lingered, a reminder that some evils can never truly be defeated. Sarah took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. The woods were silent now, the cabin empty, but she knew that the journey wasn't over. She would keep searching, keep fighting, until she brought Ethan home. And as she walked away from the clearing, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the faintest echo of a melody that she would never forget. The Piper might be gone, but his legacy remained. And Sarah knew that she would have to be ready when the shadows came calling again.